Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Becomes Ghost. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The wind blew lightly during the peaceful night. The stars were up high with no clouds in the sky, and the blue moon made the boys' tears have a soft gleam to them. Izuku Midoriya sat at the edge of a tall building, empty eyes staring at the bare ground beneath him. The world wasn't fair to the quirkless, and Izuku tried to hold on as long as he could. But after the talk with All Might, everything came crashing. All the years of bullying, abuse, discrimination, and hate has finally caught up to Izuku. He wanted to stay a bit longer so his mother wouldn't have to feel upset about his death. But he realized that he was just burdening her with his uselessness. He can see how the years of exhaustion and stress of raising a quirkless kid has done to her, and he wanted to put an end to it, even if it meant killing himself. Izuku took a shuddering breath and looked back to his bag that held his red high tops and suicide note. He made sure to write that it wasn't either his mother's or Kaken's fault on the paper, but his own. He just wasn't strong enough to keep going when all he got was harm out of every good action he did. Izuku looked back down to the ground, then stood up from where he sat and turned, so when he would fall, he would be able to see the stars sparkle and the blue moon shine as his life left him. Wait, a rough voice called out through the calm air, startling Izuku. Luckily, Izuku didn't fall from the slight scare. Looking around, Izuku found a shadow that was by the door that led to the roof. Don't do it, please. How about we talk about what's going on and try our best to fix it? Okay. Just step away from the edge. The man sounded concerned and scared. Please, just pretend you didn't see me, sir. You don't need to worry about a quirkless loser like me. Izuku sniffled, rubbing his eyes as tears began to drip down his cheek. Why did this man have to appear out of thin air? Why couldn't he leave Izuku to do what he needed to do? I can't do that. I can help you with whatever is going on in that mind of yours. You can call me Aizawa. I'm a pro hero. The man that called himself Aizawa stepped forward, ready to use his capture weapon in case the green-haired boy didn't get away from the edge. It took a moment for Izuku's eyes to adjust to the darkness around him, and when they finally did, Izuku saw a familiar capture weapon and long raven black hair. Holy shit, that's Eraserhead. He practically fights quirkless and is extremely good at mixing his hand-to-hand style with his capture weapon, making him extremely well in combat. Not only that, Eraserhead is an underground hero. Izuku's mind rambled, but Izuku bit his lip to make sure he didn't say anything out loud. He didn't want a fanboy in front of someone he looked up to, or when he was so close to the edge. Izuku was still hesitant though, because last time he talked to a pro hero, his dreams were crushed into smithereens and it pushed him to where he was now. Why do you want to help a quirkless Deku like me? I'm better off dead and not burdening everyone with my uselessness. Izuku stumbled on his words. Kid, no one is useless, even the quirkless. Come towards me, please. Don't give up. Aizawa spoke softly, and Izuku felt more tears stroll down his face without his consent. Eraserhead didn't think he was useless. The pro hero didn't think a quirkless Deku like him was useless. Oh okay, Izuku mumbled out, being careful to not fall off the edge as he climbed the railings on the roof. When Izuku was on top of the rail and was about to hop to safety, a strong feeling of something wrong made Izuku shiver slightly, then he felt something pull him. He felt something pull him off of the edge while he heard Aizawa scream for him. Izuku yelled to Aizawa as fear dominated all his emotions. He was able to see the capture weapon of the hero shooting toward him. But as he went to grab it, Izuku felt the same feeling of being pulled and he was further away from the scarf. With one last scream of fear, Izuku smacked onto the pavement with a giant thud. Everything felt like agony, and Izuku wanted to scream in pain, but his voice wouldn't work. Looking to his side, not wanting to look at the hero on the building, his vision began to fill with black spots as he saw familiar long green hair and green eyes. Izuku wanted to cry as endless sleep took control of his body and everything went dark. The last thing he felt before he passed away was fear and betrayal. Aizawa could only stare at the broken body of the green-haired kid on the ground below him. He failed. He failed saving a kid. He failed the kid that was literally right in front of him where he could have grabbed onto him and never let go. Aizawa felt anger at his failures. Then he felt sorrow as he yelled out in agony. The fear when Izuku called out to him and the way he was just a few inches away from his capture scarf's grasp would forever be burned into his brain. Aizawa got down from the building safely and walked towards Izuku, who was in a puddle of his own blood. Tears spilled from his eyes as he called the police and told them his location. Then he called Tsukachi to tell him he was going to take the rest of the night off. When he hung up with the detective, Aizawa sat by the body and closed the boy's eyes. They were hauntingly empty as tear streaks stained his face. He was so close. Izuku groaned in discomfort as he sat from where he was lying down. He was confused on why he was on the pavement in front of a building, but when he looked down, Izuku had to hold a scream of terror. His body was lying right underneath him. His neck was at an odd angle and blood was pooling all around him. It was a miracle that he was still alive after he hit the ground and saw he saw his mother in a nearby alleyway with a small smirk. His mother pulled him off of the edge and away from the safety of Aizawa's capture scarf. Izuku looked around him, hoping there was something there that would help him understand what was happening, and felt himself relax slightly when he saw Eraserhead land beside him and walked up to him with a look in his eyes that Izuku had never seen before. Mr. Aizawa, how am I still alive? And why is my body still on the ground? Izuku asked, hoping the hero would answer him, but he was ignored as the hero began calling someone. Izuku looked back down at his bloody body, wondering how he was still alive. Then he heard Aizawa say he was pulled by some force off of the building. He didn't make it. What do you mean I didn't make it? I'm right here. Izuku stood up quickly and waved his hands in front of the hero's face, but Aizawa did not react at all. Mr. Aizawa, I'm still alive. See, Izuku placed his hand on Aizawa's shoulder, but Izuku went through him like it was nothing, and that's when he realized something. I am a ghost, Izuku mumbled. Then more tears began to fill his eyes and he wailed out loud, deaf to the ears of the police and ambulance that came, and deaf to the hero who looked broken. Aizawa and Izuku sat at the area where he landed, not moving for minutes, Izuku continuing on sobbing his heart out, and the hero staring into space with so many emotions in his cold but caring eyes. I'm so sorry, Aizawa muttered out. And Izuku had the urge to tell him it wasn't his fault, but Izuku knew that Aizawa wouldn't hear him. With an exhausted huff, Aizawa got up and began to walk away from the scene while Izuku followed him without his knowledge. Izuku didn't want to go back home to see his mother. After all, how was he supposed to feel when she was the one that pulled him off the edge? It's been a full week since Izuku had been pulled off the edge. It's been a full week since Izuku decided to tag along with the only person that really tried to help him. It's been a full week and he still wasn't used to present Mike screaming. And it's been a full week when he realized the 4 cats in Aizawa's apartment can see him. Emruo, a small kitten that was about 12 weeks old and was green, came trotting up to Izuku from the hero's kitchen. The kitten rolled on its back, meowing again at Izuku, demanding for pets and scritches. 3 days after Izuku's death, Aizawa went back to do his patrolling, and while he was patrolling, he came across a green kitten in the trash and immediately adopted it. He named it Midori, which made Izuku cry. Izuku smiled softly at the kitten and bent down, trying his best to pet the small thing, but all he could really do was create a slight chill wherever he touched the kitten. Luckily, Midori didn't mind the chill, and it began to purr, making Izuku giggle slightly. When the kitten decided it had enough of being petted by the ghost child and left, Izuku slowly stood back up and looked in the mirror that was hanging at the end of the hallway. Izuku's hair was still the same messy green hair he always had, but his eyes were a milky green, and instead of the clothing he died in, he somehow was changed into a cheap-looking ghost costume that had a hood with a small smiley face on it and a small witch hat. There were patches that covered some areas on the ghost costume, and a cute green bow with white stripes on it hung from his neck. The only thing Izuku really had to complain about his appearance was the fact that there was blood that dripped from his head and onto the ghost costume, and that the ghost costume looked like it was meant for Halloween. Sighing, Izuku went down the hall and found himself in Aizawa's living room. Yamada was going over some English assignments, and Aizawa was looking at his police reports while leaning on his husband. It was a soft moment that Izuku never thought a hero like Eraserhead would enjoy, but Aizawa was full of surprises. Hey Coffee, what you looking at? Yamada glanced up from his assignment and held back a laugh as Coffee, a ragdoll cat that was missing most of its tail, made a goofy face while staring at Izuku, who was floating above Yamada. She's probably staring at a demon that is floating above you. Be careful, it might drag you into the basement and use you as a sacrifice for its Lord Savior, Nezu. Aizawa mumbled, probably sleep-deprived enough to not know what he was saying. Shuataya, don't say that type of stuff. I swear Nezu was created by Lucifer himself. Have you seen the way he smiles when he plans on pranking you? He is terrifying, and he knows everything there is to know. Yamada yelled, cause if he were to actually yell, he wouldn't have to worry about an evil demon, he would have to worry about an angry Aizawa. Izuku huffed out, making the lights flicker slightly, but Izuku didn't pay attention to that. I'm not an old demon. Geez, Izuku mumbled with a pout, but his pout didn't last long when Coffee jumped on top of Yamada's lap and onto the top of the couch, trying to sniff Izuku. I don't think you can smell me, Coffee. Izuku giggled and went to pet the cat to the best of his capabilities. Coffee just meowed and stood on her hind legs, trying to get the familiar feeling of being petted. Coffee knew that Izuku couldn't really touch her, so she didn't really mind the chills he created when he did try. Shota, I think you might be right about the demon. Yamada's startled voice carried through the room, and Izuku had to hold back a laugh. Yes, I am such a terrifying demon. See this blood? That's the blood of my enemies. Izuku glanced at Yamada, expecting him not to answer to his sarcasm. One of the perks of being a ghost is that no one can hear you badmouth them or be a sarcastic, sassy little shit. Aizawa glanced up to where Coffee was on her hind legs and groaned out loud, remembering all the weird crap she has done. She's the weird cat, remember? She would climb our hallway walls and stare at us with her evil glowing orbs whenever we head to bed. I find it more worrying that she might be plotting out death instead of ghosts. Aizawa then went back to his report, ignoring his scared husband. Wait, do they actually believe in ghosts? Izuku asked no one in particular while he accidentally stopped petting Coffee. Coffee tried to get him to pet her more, but she just fell off the couch with a thud and ran off in a random direction. Welp, the demon scared Coffee off. Aizawa spoke again, making Yamada jump from the creepy silence that was stretching after the ragdoll cat left the room. Don't say that. Yamada pushed Aizawa slightly, making the other male roll his eyes. Hey, demon, can you turn on the TV? Aizawa jokingly called out, trying to scare Yamada even more, and Izuku decided he would try to play along, even if he couldn't do anything. So Izuku floated toward the TV and touched the on button, expecting the TV to stay turned off. It was just a blank screen for a moment. Then all of a sudden the TV turned on and it began to be filled with static. Then it switched to a random news channel. Izuku yelped out and floated away from the staticky noise, his non-existent heart beating fast. Taking a deep breath, Izuku looked back to the couple on the couch, surprised to see that both of their jaws had dropped. Didn't Aizawa turn on the TV for the joke? There was no way I was able to do that, Izuku mumbled to himself, but his thoughts were cut off when Aizawa asked the demon to turn off the TV. Izuku complied, and when he touched the off button, the TV was filled with static, and then the screen went dark. Okay, so I may be able to play with the TV. What the actual fuck? Izuku yelled out, realizing that his yelling called the lights to flicker only for a second or two. Wait, does that mean I can control objects that use electricity? Izuku asked himself, then stared at the two older pale men. With little hesitation, Izuku touched the TV again and watched it flicker to life. First there was static, then the news station was back on, then Izuku turned off again. Nope, I ain't dealing with this shit today. I'm going on patrol, Aizawa grumbled, standing up and leaving his poor husband behind to deal with a ghost that just realized they can control electronics. Wait, don't go on patrol yet. You have to help me deal with this demon. Please, Yamada shrieked, clinging onto his husband, drawing out a small giggle from Izuku that seemed to be heard by both adults. They both froze in shock, looking around to figure out where that childlike giggle came from. When they didn't see anybody that could make that noise, Aizawa grabbed his capture weapon and jumped out the window, and Yamada made a squeaking noise and ran into his room. The cats were extremely confused about what was going on with their owners. Izuku was excited to know that he could interact with electronic devices, and Yamada and Aizawa were scared shitless. Izuku always wondered what Yamada and Aizawa did throughout the day. They would always leave and come back with papers that they have to mark and check, so they were obviously some sort of teacher, but what did they teach and what school did they teach at? The one day, Izuku let his curiosity get the best of him. When Aizawa and Yamada left to go to their teaching job, Izuku had the bright idea that, hey, he was a ghost. No one will be able to see him anyways, so he followed them. When they were walking to the train station, Izuku noticed that the people with animal-like quirks didn't see him either. They would just walk through him, get a shiver up their spine, then continued walking to wherever they were needed. Another thing that didn't leave Izuku's notice was the fact that every time he floated by a dog, it would bark viciously at him, and cats would just watch him follow the two heroes. Izuku was glad the two heroes didn't have dogs. That would have been annoying. When the trio finally made it to UA, Izuku was bouncing in excitement and awe. Aizawa and Yamada both worked at UA. They teach the future heroes at the school that All Might, the number one hero, the symbol of peace, attended. Izuku let his inner fanboy out as he looked at the gates, absently following the two heroes while thinking of what was going to happen in this school. What subject did Aizawa and Yamada teach? They probably didn't teach together, so Izuku was definitely gonna follow Aizawa when the man goes to class. To say the school was big was an understatement. Izuku's mouth was agape as he watched third, second, and first years running around, getting ready for quizzes, exams, training, and many more things. There was a group of second-year students that Izuku thought was quite interesting while floating by. There was a girl with long light blue hair who was telling a story about a puppy with a quirk she saw. There was a boy with indigo hair that seemed to be really shy with how his shoulders are hunched and how he won't speak above a whisper. And there was a loud blonde boy that was talking just as excitedly to the blue-haired girl. Seeing that group made Izuku realize how lonely he truly was. Sure, he was lonely when he was alive, but people acknowledge his existence. Now no one knows he still exists or cares about the fact that he died. The only people he saw that truly cared about him was Aizawa. His mother pulled him off the edge. Kaken was probably happy that he didn't have such a worthless Deku around him. His dad never called or cared for him, and All Might was the last push that sent him to that edge. Aizawa was the one that lent out a hand and tried to catch him despite the odds. so Izuku wanted to keep an eye on the older man, hoping that one day he would be able to converse with him and apologize for what happened. It wasn't Aizawa's fault he fell, it was Izuku's and his mother. Go to class, Aizawa grumbled as he walked by the trio, startling Izuku and the weird group. The group gave Aizawa and Yamada a sheepish smile, then walked away to head to their own classes, still chatting about the puppy. Izuku thought they were interesting enough that he might follow them around if he got bored and wanted to see what more of the classes are like. But he was happy with just trailing behind Aizawa for now. When Izuku got into the teacher lounge, he had to hold back a squeal when he saw a group of different pro heroes in their costumes or some sort of uniform. He thought there was going to be regular teachers, but it was all pro heroes. Holy crap, is that midnight? OMG, that's 13 and Snipe. Izuku gasped and floated around the heroes he mentioned. It was cool to see them on TV, but it was freaking amazing to see them with his own 2 eyes. I wish I could have met them when I was actually alive, Izuku mumbled when he went back to Aizawa's side, continuing to look at the heroes with awe. Izuku was too distracted that he didn't notice a certain principal eyeing him, or the fact that Yamada and Aizawa felt slightly weird when Izuku left them for a bit. The 2 pros didn't feel the normal presence or coolness they have gotten used to, so when Izuku left, it felt slightly weird. Izuku absently floated above the teachers during the meeting. They were talking about the entrance exam and Izuku silently prayed for those who had a mind-based quirks instead of physical. Izuku thought the exam was pretty biased, but it's not like he could voice his concerns. No one would hear him. It was just quiet chatter until there was a slight creak from the door, and Izuku felt all his blood drain from his face once again when he saw who entered. It was All Might. Why did it have to be All Might? Fuck, Izuku whispered as despair and flashes of falling went through his mind. He clenched his fist and the lights began to flicker, reacting to the strong emotions that Izuku was feeling. Is All Might a teacher here too? Is that the reason All Might is here instead of where he agency is? Izuku thought, keeping a close eye on the man. Did one of your kids explode something, Higari? Midnight asked the power loader, the lights still flickering lightly before they went back to neutral. It was a natural occurrence, so the teachers didn't give it much thought, unlike Nezu who quickly glanced at the upset spirit. I don't doubt it, I'll be right back, Higari mumbled before standing up and hurrying down the halls to see what was going on with his students. They always seem to be exploding everything they touch. Actually, everyone is dismissed. We covered everything that needed to be covered today. All Might, I want you to stay here for a second. I would like to speak with you, Nezu chirped while clapping his paws together with a wide grin. Izuku decided he was gonna stay for a bit just to keep his eyes on All Might. It may be selfish, but he wanted to see if All Might regretted the words he said on the rooftop of that day. He needed to know if All Might regretted it, or if he didn't care. The lights flicker again as Izuku scowled at the tall blonde before floating beside Nezu. All Might may be the #1 hero, but he isn't Izuku's hero as much anymore. He may respect the man, but he was still upset. Sit down, would you like some tea? Nezu chirped, ignoring the cold spot the little ghost created beside him. Nezu thought it was quite interesting that a ghost had attached themselves to Aizawa or Yamada, but he guessed it would be accepted if that boy was the boy that Aizawa mentioned the night of the suicide. Not only that, but Midoriya seems to have some sort of negative feelings for the #1 hero and is watching him very carefully. How interesting. What would you like to talk about, Principal Nezu? All Might sat down, accepting the tea that the animal gave him. It wasn't a rare occurrence that Nezu would sit down to have tea with him, so All Might wasn't too worried about anything. I was wondering if you have found anyone to be your successor yet. Of course you still have some time, but the sooner we can get the student ready, the better. Nezu spoke energetically, and Izu wished he had that much energy. What does he mean by successor? Izuku mumbled as he leaned forward, not aware that Nezu's ears twitched toward him. I guess that makes sense if he plans on retiring from his position. It would be a smart move with that injury of his and his time limit. But what would they need to get the successor ready for? They would have to climb the hero ranks. They won't get the #1 spot so easily, so it has to be something that could be given to them. But what? Izuku mumbled in his hand, unaware that Nezu's smile wasn't for All Might, but for the analyzing ghost. I'm thinking of giving young Mirio my quirk. He does seem to have that drive in him. To be a hero, you need a strong drive and willingly put a lot of work into your heroism career. Mirio seems to have the drive and enthusiasm. All Might mumbled into his hand, and Nezu immediately noticed that the ghost stopped mumbling and was seething at the older man. This just got really interesting, Nezu thought as he listened to the ghost's voice. You need a strong drive to become a hero. Are you fucking kidding me, All Might? Izuku yelled, lights flickering once again, and the TV in the lounge turned on with static. You fucking told me that I needed to have a quirk to be a hero, to think realistically. Now you're saying that all you need is to have the determination to be a hero. When I asked, you said I needed to have a quirk to think realistically. Now look at me. I thought realistically, and now I'm dead. Izuku screamed at All Might, only Nezu hearing this rant with concern. Then the lights went out in the office, and the emergency lights turned on. Oh my, I guess a child with an electric quirk got slightly out of hand, Nezu mumbled, standing up to go to his desk to check the cameras. All the lights in UA were on, so it was only limited to the teacher's lounge. That's good. Nezu didn't want to deal with panicked students at the moment. It looks like the lights in the other areas of the school are doing quite well. You may be dismissed, All Might. It was a pleasure chatting with you. All Might stood up hesitantly, bowing before he left the room. All Might was confused about why the power went out and why he felt so much fear and dread in that room. The emotions were so much, it was hard to keep his face masked when talking to Nezu. Was Nezu trying some sort of invention out and decided he was going to be his guinea pig? While back in the room, Nezu took a deep breath as Izuku sat in a corner wailing. The only thing running through Izuku's head was why did All Might have to tell him to think realistically? Why couldn't All Might say that if he put his determination and hard work into heroism, he might be able to make it? Sure, he would be in more danger without a quirk, but there are many people with quirks that aren't suited for fighting in different situations. Why couldn't All Might give him false hope instead of pushing him to the edge? Why couldn't All Might help him? Izuku sniffled as he tried to wipe his tears away, but they just kept coming no matter how hard he tried to stop them. The darkness with the dim emergency lights made it so it wasn't too dark but not too bright in the room, which helped Izuku calm slightly. All Might wasn't in the room, which helped Izuku greatly. Only he and Nezu were in the room, and Nezu was crouching in front of him. Wait a minute. Izuku stared into Nezu's eyes, thinking Nezu was playing some sort of game. That thought was thrown out of the window when the principal stood up with a smile on his face and said, "Am I a mouse, a dog, or a bear? But more importantly, I'm the principal, Nezu." Izuku gaped at Nezu for a moment, then looked behind him, then back at the principal when he saw no one was behind him. "Are you talking to me?" Izuku asked, embarrassed that the principal of UA could have seen him fanboy, floating around aimlessly, and crying. But most importantly, Izuku had a small sliver of hope that someone could see him. "Of course I'm talking to you, Midoriya. You are the only one in this room, besides me, of course." Izuku felt tears filling his eyes once again. But instead of sad tears, they were happy tears. Someone could see him. Someone could actually see him. Izuku stood up suddenly, more hope than he ever had in years, flowing through his veins. "You're not joking, right? You can actually hear and see me. Also, how do you know my name?" "I don't lie, Midoriya. Us animals have special genes in our eyes that let us see things that normal human eyes can't. And the reason I know your name is because Aizawa has spoken about you before. I've seen him upset many times when he was my student, but I've only seen him this upset once before," Nezu said as he went to sit down on one of the couches and pulled out a tablet that had a game of chess on it. "Come sit down and let's chat. I hope you like chess." Before Izuku met Nezu, he thought that Nezu was this scary pro-hero that you should never mess with or converse with if you want to keep your sanity. Now that Izuku has met Nezu, the mammal is still scary and you still shouldn't converse with him if you want to keep your sanity. But Izuku felt happy that Nezu could keep up with his mumbling. And not only that, Nezu thought Izuku was smart. Though, it was kinda weird that Nezu did not question why Izuku was there. Izuku guessed that Nezu figured out he was just going wherever Aizawa and Yamato went. "Checkmate," Izuku softly said as he took Nezu's king out, winning the game for the second time. Nezu has won 4 times while Izuku only won twice, but Izuku wasn't complaining. It was nice to play a game with someone again. He felt less lonely than what he usually felt, which was a pleasant surprise for Izuku. That was quite an unsuspecting win. "Good job, Midoriya," Nezu chirped as he put the electronic tablet away and pulled out a cup of tea out of thin air. "But as much as I enjoy your company, I must get back to work," Nezu said, sounding a bit disappointed that he couldn't play any mind games with the only person that seemed to be quite intelligent. Izuku tried to keep the sadness and disappointed look off of his face. But Nezu seemed to be able to see that Izuku was upset about the turn of events. "If you do get bored or lonely, maybe you could try pranking some students while you're here. As long as you don't interfere with their work too badly, there shouldn't be a problem," Nezu said, trying to keep the ghost somewhat happy. For some reason, Nezu did not enjoy seeing Midoriya upset. He wanted to keep Izuku happy. "Are you sure? I don't want to annoy anybody," Izuku mumbled, picking at his fingers, and Nezu laughed lightly. "You're a ghost. It's not like they could do anything to you, Midoriya. Actually, how about instead of pranking and bugging the students, you play with the teachers? They should be more interesting. And it's quite funny when they have trouble figuring out their electronics and question their own sanity." Nezu chuckled, which made Izuku laugh lightly. "Maybe playing with the teachers wouldn't be too bad. I'll try, but if they come in here running and crying, it's not my fault," Izuku chirped before he went through the door, leaving Nezu alone with a satanic grin. He was definitely going to be watching the cameras to see the pro-heroes struggle. Izuku floated through the empty hallways, trying to figure out who should be his first victim. He could do Aizawa and Yamada, but they were already used to their TV turning on randomly and their lights flickering. They might find it creepy that the ghost followed them from home though, and Izuku was kinda curious about their reaction to UA being haunted. It took a while of floating through walls and being confused with the architecture that is UA, but Izuku finally found Yamada. Yamada was doing a presentation about English culture, which was on a projector that was connected to his computer. This was perfect. Izuku smirked as he floated behind Yamada, who was excitedly talking about Canada and the cute Arctic fox he saw there when he went on a business trip. Izuku remembered that Yamada had to do a trip to Canada when he was younger, so it was cool to hear what he saw there. But Izuku wasn't at Yamada's class to listen to Yamada chat, he was there to toy with him. Taking a deep breath, Izuku touched the computer that had the horrid there on it. He was practically saving the students from losing their minds over those evil words. The computer began to make a weird noise as static filled the screen from the ghost's touch. And then all of a sudden, a video from somewhere around 2013 came on. It showed two cats on the screen and they both were fighting with lightsabers in their paws. Yamada spluttered as he tried to get the video off and bring back the presentation. But Izuku wouldn't let him. Are you serious? I thought this problem was gonna stay at home. Yamada whined out when another video showed up. This time it was something called a Vine compilation. And the students who were watching their teacher have a meltdown over the computer were quite amused. Finally, Yamada picked up his phone and sent a text to someone in distress. It took a full minute before the door to the room swung open, startling everyone, including Izuku. Aizawa was at the door with his arms crossed as he glared at everyone in Yamada's room with his quirk. He knew it wouldn't fix the electronic problem because none of the students had an electric quirk, but it made him look intimidating. Stop this right now. You can bug us at our house, but not here. Play with the other teachers, Aizawa growled out, making the students confused about who the teacher was talking to. Izuku pouted at the other teacher but complied and brought up the presentation while whispering sorry to the students' sanity. Apparently the Yamada students heard the small sorry and began to slightly freak out about who else was in the room with them, but the teachers were not fazed by it. It's not often, but sometimes they would hear crying, small giggles, or the occasional word every once in a while. The demon ghost thing never spoke higher than a whisper, which confused the two teachers sometimes, and it only ever spoke one word. Aizawa grumbled incoherently as Yamada spewed out his thanks to Aizawa, and he walked out of the room with Izuku tailing behind him. Izuku didn't stay beside Aizawa for long because as he floated, he saw the three students he took interest in. They were in a class with ectoplasm, who was doing math on a projector as well. Izuku floated away from Aizawa, who shivered when the lack of the presence left as he continued to walk. Aizawa said he could bug the other teachers, just not him and Yamada, and Izuku thought this time he would creep the teacher out instead of putting up silly videos. The static trick should work, but that would only work for a couple seconds before the teacher thinks there was an actual problem. Maybe he could get an image of something creepy up with a weird glitching effect. With that thought in mind, Izuku floated into the room and began to play with Ectoplasm's computer. He let it fill with static, and Izuku thought he had about 15 seconds before it got annoying. So putting his ghostly hands to work, Izuku pulled up a creepy picture of an old cryptid known as Siren Head, standing by some trees. A glitching effect was in display as a soft sound of a siren echoed through the class. What is that? The blue-haired girl yelled out when she saw the creepy glitching photo, and the rest of the class seemed to be startled as well. What the hell? Ectoplasm yelled out in shock as the glitching in the picture grew worse and worse, and then the computer turned off as the lights above them began to flicker slightly. Then the lights went out, making the class yell in panic. Then the lights went back on and the projector and computer were back to normal. It was like nothing happened at all. Ectoplasm looked around the class to find the culprit, but he didn't see anyone that could do what just happened, so he made a clone and sent it to Principal Nezu, hoping that the weird principal could help out with the situation. Meanwhile, Izuku was trying to stifle a giggle in the corner of the room. Izuku was actually surprised that he enjoyed that. He normally hated scaring others, but ever since he became a ghost, he realized he slightly enjoyed it. It was kinda unnerving. Izuku floated there, giggling above the students until Ectoplasm's clone and Nezu walked into the room. Izuku and Nezu made eye contact for a moment, and Nezu smiled slightly. This is good training for the teachers, and it helped Nezu see who would do what during a time if the power ever went out, went weird, or if villains with an electrical quirk began to mess with their computers. By the end of the day, Izuku found himself back in Nezu's room, chilling around and making random chatter with Nezu. Izuku hoped that Nezu didn't mind his constant mumble. It just felt nice that he was being heard by someone again, and he missed it greatly. Midoriya, have you ever tried talking to Aizawa or Yamada? Nezu looked up from where he was playing with a weird box. I have tried, but it has always fallen to deaf ears. And when I tried to use the TV or computer, it never worked out in my favor. Izuku grumbled out as he floated towards Nezu and looked over his shoulder to see what he was doing. Have you ever tried using a spirit box? Many ghost hunters have used it before and gained well results. Nezu held out the box to Izuku. The spirit box is a kind of device that can rapidly scan through multiple audio channels that makes it relatively easy for ghosts to speak to the living. All you have to do is speak into that little microphone right there, and we should be able to hear you, Nezu said, and Izuku's eyes widened as he leaned down and said hello into it. The box sounded really disoriented with the channels it was going through, but Nezu and Izuku both heard his voice come through the spirit box. It was rough, but it sounded like Izuku, despite the extreme static. Izuku stared at the box in amazement, and Nezu had to hold back a laugh as Izuku gaped at him, then the device, and then yelled out in excitement and joy. Wait a minute. Does this mean I can talk with Aizawa and Yamada now? Izuku gasped, and Nezu nodded his head with a giant grin. That was one of the main reasons why Nezu made the device. He knew Izuku wanted to talk to Aizawa and Yamada. If Izuku began to wail out of joy, Nezu was not going to judge him. After all, he would have gone insane if no one could see or hear him. If you would like, I can call the two heroes up at the end of classes. So while we wait, what type of quirk theories do you have? Nezu said, and Izuku perked up before going into a deep ramble about his thoughts and theories on the powers. Izuku fidgeted with his hands as he waited for his two favorite pro heroes to show up in Nezu's office. Izuku was nervous that they wouldn't let him hang out with them anymore, or try to get rid of him. Izuku didn't want to roam around the streets as a ghost. That would be boring and lonely. Not only that, how would Aizawa react when Izuku apologizes and tells him it isn't the man's fault? Izuku's mind was going a mile a minute as Nezu just sat patiently in his chair, sending a few curious glances to the anxious ghost. When the door opened with a slight creak, Izuku yelped out loud when he was brought out of his thoughts. At the door was Aizawa, who looked exhausted, and Yamada, who looked tired, but not as tired as Aizawa. They must have just finished doing some sort of training. Aizawa, Yamada. Sit down please. I got some exciting things happening at this moment, Nezu chirped, holding the spirit box that Aizawa and Yamada gave a curious glance to. What do you want, Principal Nezu? Aizawa grumbled, making Nezu chuckle. Well, a little ghost told me that you two have some sort of spirit following you around. Nezu laughed, making Yamada and Aizawa perk up. How do you know that? Yamada asked, not fully aware that all animals could see Izuku. Yamada thought it was only cats and dogs that could see ghosts. And demons, not all animals. I'm not a human, Yamada. Us animals have a special gene in our eyes that let us see anomalies that humans may not see. I thought you would know this. Now, would you like some tea before we start anything? Nezu held out a small kettle filled with hot water. Aizawa was good with just his coffee in his travel mug, and Yamada accepted the tea from the smaller mammal. Now what I have in my hand is a spirit box. With the spirit box, the child that is following you should be able to speak with you. Are you ready? Nezu held out the box towards Izuku, and Izuku's nerves shot up, making the lights flicker lightly. Aizawa nodded, not really interested in this, and Yamada nodded enthusiastically, excited to finally hear the thing that has been following them around all this time. Hello Aiza and Dia Yamada. The voice box echoed through the room, and Aizawa went deathly pale while Yamada squealed in excitement and fear to finally hear the ghost properly. It was so cool to hear the ghost despite it being disoriented and cutting out every once in a while. Aizawa was frozen as he replayed that sentence in his head. He knew that voice. Aizawa knew that voice as it sounded extremely familiar to Izuku Midoriya, the boy he couldn't save from falling off the rooftop. The way Izuku sounded broken on that day, and the way Izuku screamed for him as he fell was burned into his brain, haunting him as he slept. Midoriya, Aizawa whispered, afraid if he were to speak too loudly, that his voice would crack with all the emotion he put in that name. Hi Mr. Aizawa, Izuku said through the device, while he was filled with joy that he could finally talk to the hero. Tears dripped down Izuku's face as Aizawa had a few tears himself fill the corner of his eyes but not falling. Aizawa disliked crying, but his emotions didn't care at the moment. I anted to say it wasn't your fault. I was pulled off the row roof by my mother. You did nothing wrong. The spirit box continued to crackle. You did WHUQLD. WHCHM grateful for. Izuku rubbed his arms nervously, remembering the day, then continuing before the other could speak. I may be dead, but you are my hero. That seemed to break Aizawa as the tears slipped down his face. Aizawa looked downwards and shoved his face in the crook of his elbow as he cried silently. I'm so sorry, I am so fucking sorry. Aizawa mumbled out, voice cracking with emotion. Nezu smiled softly at Aizawa, and Yamada moved closer to Aizawa and hugged him as the man continued to cry his silent tears. It's all right, Aizawa. You did what you could. Izuku sniffled as he rubbed at his own crying eyes. He was so happy that he could finally tell Aizawa that it wasn't his fault. Aizawa didn't deserve to feel the guilt of Izuku falling to his death. Aizawa was a good man. That seemed to make Aizawa cry harder, and tears seemed to drip down Yamada's face as well. Yamada knew how much of a toll that death has put on Aizawa, so when Yamada realized Aizawa recognized that voice, he knew this was going to be a roller coaster of emotions. But one thing that the young ghost said had caught his attention. Once Aizawa had calmed down from the rush of emotions, Yamada decided to ask a depressing question that was on the tip of his tongue. "You said your mother pulled you off the roof. How and why did she do that?" Yamada asked softly. Izuku was slightly shocked by the question, but Izuku guessed he got himself in that mess. So going near the spirit box again, Izuku began to speak. I was supposed to be querulous. I guess as she didn't love me and used a turquoise on me, pulling me off the roof. The spirit box echoed with static, and everyone felt their blood boil. "Well, you won't need to worry about her, Midoriya. We will make sure she gets the consequences she deserves," Nezu said in a calm voice. Midoriya wanted to tell him that they didn't have to do anything, but he was hit with a thought. If she killed her own son, would she kill any other quirkless children? With that in mind, Izuku kept his mouth shut and nodded, knowing that Nezu could see him. It was silent as everyone absorbed the information that was dropped. It has been a weird day for all of the adults and teen. Will you still be sticking with us? Aizawa spoke through the thick silence that was created. As much as Aizawa didn't want to admit it, it was a comforting thought to have Midoriya around instead of floating aimlessly through the streets. And despite the kid being dead, he wanted Izuku to join the family so he wouldn't be lonely, and so Aizawa and Yamada could give him the kindness he needed his whole life. If that's all rigged tea. Both Aizawa and Yamada heard from the device, and a small smile grew on their faces. "That's definitely all right, ghosty listener. Glad to have you here," Yamada yelled, and Aizawa agreed with the loud man. Izuku looked at the two heroes before he let out a sob. Is this what a family feels like? Izuku thought as he thanked Aizawa, Yamada, and Nezu. It has been around a week since Izuku was able to get in contact with Aizawa and Yamada. Aizawa and Yamada had welcomed Izuku into their family with open arms and have tried their best to include Izuku in some of the activities they do at UA or home. They wanted to make sure Izuku felt like he was cared for, that someone was there for him. Nezu had also done his best to take care of the young boy and would often play a game of chess with Izuku on his tablet. During one of the times where Izuku would hang out with Nezu, Izuku had mentioned turning the spirit box he often used to communicate with the adults into earpieces. Nezu agreed with Izuku and had said that it was actually a smart idea, which made Izuku happy. So with the thought of a spirit box earpiece, Nezu had put himself to work and finished creating the equipment in less than a day. The main differences when it comes between the spirit box and the earpieces is that the earpieces were much quieter and Izuku could talk to one person instead of having a whole room of people hear what he has to say. Izuku was happy with everything that was happening in his afterlife. He was treated with more respect, people actually paid attention to him, and he was actually treated like a human. News of his mother wasn't good though. Apparently after his death, she went missing without a single trace. It was like she was never there or existed, which was causing some problems. But despite his mother missing after killing him, Izuku still tried to look on the positives, even if it was extremely hard most of the time. Some nights Izuku would sing or talk all night, just to make sure that he could still be heard. Izuku would turn off and on appliances to see if he could still interact with some stuff of the living, and Izuku still kept pulling pranks and causing mischief. Aizawa and Yamada had never told Izuku to shut up or to stop playing with the microwave or computer. Sometimes they would ask if he could sing quieter or to play with the light switch instead. But they never told him to stop. They knew that Izuku had the fear of being forgotten or never being able to interact with the living. They were reminded almost every day when one of their earpieces died and they could hear Izuku. Izuku has also actually gained a name for himself at UA after pranking the weird group of 3 teens he saw at UA. It was during a quiet study session and the loud blonde, airheaded girl and the shy nervous male all went to study together. Izuku had pulled up a song named Megalovania from an old game called Undertale on all their computers and phones, then continued playing the song on them at the same time. Not only that, but Izuku was able to create a small draft that messed up their papers slightly. They all yelped in surprise when the music began blaring and the papers went flying. The loud blonde, who was named Mirio, laughed it off, saying that UA's resident ghost was here to haunt them and to steal their souls. The bubbly girl named Nejire was slightly scared of the fact that there could be a ghost after her soul. And Tamaki, who was the introvert of the group, leaned up against a wall and began mumbling something Izuku couldn't quite hear. After the stunt, people began calling him Mischief the Ghost. With each day that passed though, Izuku felt something deep in him gone. He didn't know what he was missing, but he was missing something important. He was missing some sort of peace for his ghostly form. He tried asking Nezu about the empty feeling in him, but Nezu didn't have any idea of what the missing piece was. Nezu hasn't really met a ghost that still had their human form, and the ghost he has met never mentioned the feeling of a missing piece before. Izuku grumbled as he floated across the room. He was really bored at the moment and needed something to do. Sadly, there wasn't much a ghost can do. Aizawa was out on patrol and Yamada was doing his radio show at the moment. Izuku would have loved to go with Yamada, but he didn't exactly know how Yamada's expensive radio equipment would be affected. Izuku didn't want to accidentally break any valuable electronics, and he didn't want to ruin the songs that play from his radio. Looking outside, Izuku thought about going for a stroll. The worst that could happen is that he could get lost and have to spend a day or two trying to find his way back home. With that thought in mind, Izuku floated through the wall, leaving the cats alone to their own devices, and began to float down the streets. It was a quiet night and nothing big seemed to be happening that night, which helped Izuku with his anxiety slightly. A small girl with ruby red eyes and long white messy hair ran down an alley as fast as her tiny feet could go. She tried her best to ignore the sound of his shoes hitting the pavement as he followed her slowly. Uri knew she couldn't get away from Chisaki as she was too slow, but it was worth a shot. She didn't want to be a test subject anymore. She didn't want to wake up every day only to be met with needles and being destroyed only to be put back together again. She was getting tired with each day, minute, and second that passed by. She wanted it all to stop. Uri's harsh breathing echoed through the alleyway as she continued to run. Uri continued to run until she saw a pair of glowing green orbs at the entrance of the alley. When Uri saw the orbs, something in her snapped and she ran harder than she has ever ran in her life. Those green orbs meant kindness. Those green orbs meant safety. Those green orbs gave her hope. Uri reached her hands out to the green orbs with such urgency in her eyes and movements. There was a weird feeling of a force in the wind. The air around the orbs felt solid and Uri hugged it. The feeling of cold arms wrapped around her protectively, and Uri could see a breath come from something that wasn't there. The green orbs. Uri was so frantic to get to look at her with concern and care, making Uri want to cry. Would they protect her or would they let go and let her be captured? I got you. A low whisper echoed through the wind with care. Uri almost missed it with how quiet it was, but she heard it. The green orbs were gonna help her. Uri. A low growl came from the alleyway, and Uri felt her blood freeze as she clutched onto the nothingness she was able to hold on to. Uri hesitantly looked behind her to see Chisaki standing above her without his gloves on and a malicious glow to his golden eyes. Those eyes promised more experiments and pain. Tears swelled up in Uri's eyes as Chisaki moved towards her with his ungloved hands. She was frozen in fear and couldn't move. He was gonna destroy her and put her back together again and again and again. She can't go through that. She just can't. Uri cried out in fear when the hand was only a couple inches away from her face. Then everything went into slow motion. A blast of wind that came from nowhere blew her hair upwards, and the hand that was closest to Uri's face fell to the ground. Uri's ears were ringing when blood began to pool around Chisaki's dismembered hand, and blood dripped from Chisaki's arm and onto the concrete below. The glimpse of steel could be seen as green orbs glared into Chisaki's golden ones. Then everything went back into normal speed as Chisaki stumbled backwards with an audible yell of surprise and pain. What the hell? Chisaki yelled, his other hand going to touch his damaged arm so he could bring it back to normal. Uri's eyes went wide as she saw the glint of steel again, and wind blew her hair to the side this time. Chisaki yelled in surprise as one of his fingers fell from his hand and onto the floor. What's going on? Whoever's there, show yourself. Chisaki yelled into the empty air with anger. He needed to get out of there if he wanted to survive, but he couldn't leave Uri behind. She was too crucial to his plans. Leave, or I will be taking more than just your hands and fingers. The same voice from before whispered into the air, but much louder than last time. You can't see or touch me, making you useless against me. This girl is mine, and I would appreciate it if I didn't get blood on her or myself today. Uri felt the cold embrace she was in become slightly warmer, and when she looked up at the glowing orbs she saw at the end of the alleyway, she was met with sharp green eyes and a freckled face. The boy who was holding her was in some sort of ghost costume you see in kids' books, and he had a scythe in hand that had a green handle and a dark green blade. The red from Chisaki's blood danced on the blade of the weapon, and black lines danced around the handle of the scythe. Leave, the green-eyed boy screamed at Chisaki, and it looked like raw fear had made its home in Chisaki's instincts as he stumbled backwards and ran from them. Uri couldn't help the cry of relief she let out as the warm hands held her closer and began to mumble soft words to her. When Izuku was floating down the street, he was expecting to have nothing but peace and quiet. But nope, somehow life still screwed him over, even in death. When Izuku was floating, he felt something tug in him. Either it be his instincts, heart, or soul, it didn't really matter to Izuku until he found himself in an area that he never really walked in before. The area was run down and there wasn't a single person around. Well, until Izuku heard someone running from an alleyway and was greeted by ruby eyes and messy white hair. The little girl from the alleyway came crashing into him, mumbling about how green meant safety, and Izuku was startled, being surprised by the fact that he was able to touch the little girl and the fact that the little girl could hold and see him. Izuku wanted to scream, but it seemed like the girl could only see his irises with the way she kept mentioning green orbs. Izuku remembered how he felt an empty spot in himself a couple days ago and how with each passing day, That feeling grew stronger, like it was trying to tell Izuku to find what was missing. With Izuku's arms wrapped around the girl's head and back, he began to realize how that feeling disappeared the moment he saw her ruby-red eyes. Izuku didn't know what to think of the predicament he found himself in. This girl was obviously running from someone, but who? Trying to think of what's happening. Izuku's head then proceeded to whip upwards when something sinister began to come from the alleyway. Izuku could feel himself freeze in fear, as the same with the little girl. Izuku held onto the girl tightly as he breathed out a chilled air and hoped that the girl could hear him say, "I got you." Izuku may be dead, but he will do what he can to protect her. Something clicked in Izuku's heart or soul, and the feeling of warmth came through his body. The urge to protect this girl was far greater than any other feeling Izuku has had. This girl was his missing piece. He was her guardian, and Izuku would gladly die twice to protect her. Izuku growled out loud when he met golden eyes. Those eyes meant harm, and it grated on Izuku's nerves. Without a conscious thought of how he's doing it, black liquid began to swim around his hand and formed a sigh. Izuku barely registered what he was doing when the hand of the man came close to him and the girl that was called. In one swift movement, Izuku began to do his best to fulfill his job as a guardian reaper. Aizawa stared at the little girl at his door. Eri looked at Aizawa with big scared eyes, fidgeting with the bandages on her arms, and then proceeded to look over at Izuku, who was giving her an encouraging smile. "It's all right, he won't hurt you," Izuku reassured Eri, and Eri nodded. Hi, Imuriri. Izu. Izuku said I would be safe here. Eri stuttered on her words, voice barely above a whisper. It was Halloween night and Izuku felt like he just had 10 espresso shots. Izuku doesn't know why and how he was suddenly full of energy, but he wasn't complaining. Floating around, Izuku kept playing with the lights of the house, much to the dismay of the two pro heroes and little girl living there. Don't get them wrong, they loved that Izuku felt more alive than usual. But the hero's electric bill was gonna be a pain in the ass, and the constant flashing lights was kinda giving Aizawa a headache. Of course, that wasn't the only thing giving him a headache. There was the yelling of Yamada and the doorbell that would echo through the house whenever a child came to their home to steal some candy. Eri, of course, was a sweetheart and was confused of what was happening all night. Aizawa talked to her while Izuku was too busy having a sugar rush of some sort and Yamada was handing out candy. She enjoyed the sound of Halloween, but she didn't like how scary it was. Whenever a child came by, Izuku would always follow Yamada to see any interesting quirks and costumes. One kid that caught his attention was a boy with crazy law-defying purple hair that was dressed up as some sort of skeleton. He did extremely well on the makeup and had some sort of bodysuit that had bones painted on it. The boy also had a cane with a skull on top of it and a top hat. Trick or treat. The boy with purple hair spoke, voice rough as if he hasn't spoken often. The voice caught Izuku's attention even more, and when the boy began walking away, Izuku decided he wanted to follow him. He seemed really cool. Eri, I will be back. I'm just going to go for a stroll, Izuku called out. And the little voice of affirmation was all Izuku needed to hear before he floated out of the building and found the skeleton purple-haired boy. Shinsu wanted to go trick-or-treating one more time before the orphanage he was currently occupying decided he was too old for the free candy. Shinsu wasn't much of a fan of having to go out and talk to people, but he got free treats out of it and that's all that mattered to him. But after visiting that one house where a man dressed up as Present Mike, Shinsu has been getting the weird feeling of a watch. Whenever he looked behind him to see who was watching, all he would see was a child or two going to another house. But he also has been seeing some sort of green robs at the corner of his eyes. He thought that was just his imagination or some random lights some kids activated, so he just ignored the strange orbs. The feeling of being watched at this moment didn't feel dangerous as well. It was like something was looking over him as if it was protecting him. Usually when he felt like someone was watching him, he would feel like he was in danger, and it was usually because he was in danger. These pair of eyes felt safe. Looking over at another house that had Halloween decorations and their lights on, Shinsu headed there and rang the doorbell. It took a moment, but when the door opened, Shinsu loudly said, "Trick or treat. Try RTR it." There was the sound of another boy yelling out a trick or treat beside his ear, and Shinsu stumbled away from where the kid was, only to find no one. Well, except for a pair of glowing green orbs. But those disappeared in less than a second. Both the lady and Shinsu said in shock of what they just witnessed. The lady, who also witnessed what happened, shook her head slightly and handed Shinsu a big candy bar with a smile. That was quite interesting. Hope you have a happy Halloween and make sure that little ghosty doesn't hurt you, the lady said, and Shinsu nodded, still reeling from what just happened. Thank you, happy Halloween, Shinsu said as he descended the stairs and kept glancing to the side when he caught a glimpse of green every once in a while. Izuku happily cheered on with Shinsu as he loudly said trick or treat, thinking that the two people wouldn't hear him like usual. Apparently he was wrong when both the lady and kid both looked in his direction in surprise. Izuku stumbled over himself, but the two looked away from him after a second. What the hell? Izuku mumbled, still following the purple kid. After that incident, Izuku was a little quieter, but he still followed the purple-haired kid. Despite only following him for around 30 minutes and Shinsu never interacting with him, Izuku felt oddly connected to him. It was pretty chill. They visited 3 more houses, and the Shinsu wanted to visit 1 more house before heading home. The house Shinsu was heading towards didn't have a lot of Halloween decorations, but it had a pumpkin, some spider's webs, and a tombstone or 2. The lights were on, and it was considered good to go too. There wasn't as much kids in this area, so the sidewalks and streets were a little bare in the night at the moment. Shinsu ranged the doorbell, and after a couple minutes, Shinsu and Izuku thought the house wasn't giving out any candy this Halloween night, so they turned around and were about to leave, but a disembodied hand abruptly grabbed Shinsu's wrist when they turned around. "What the fuck?" Shinsu yelped out when the hand pulled him towards the now open door that had a weird old man with a smile that literally reached his ears at the entrance. Izuku assumed the hand that was pulling Shinsu was a part of the man's quirk by how he was missing one of his hands. "Let go of me," Shinsu yelled as he tried to loosen the grip around his wrist to no luck. There was a small crack on the ground Shinsu was on, making the ground uneven, and Shinsu tripped. With the weight of falling and being pulled, Shinsu tumbled into the house as Izuku yelled out, "Oh shit," and went after the boy. The weird smiling man didn't answer as Shinsu continued to yell at the creep, and Izuku tried to pull his hands off of Shinsu's wrist. Izuku was kinda glad he decided to stick with Shinasu. If only he learned how to use those weird skills he used with Uri when Chisaki came by. "Let go of him," Izuku yelled, kicking at the man and prying at his fingers, but his body just went through the creep. Tears were pricking at the purple boy's eyes as he continued to fight the old guy as he dragged them to what looked like a heavily barricaded door. "We need to get out of here now," Izuku yelled, putting as much of the energy he had all night to use with no prevail. "Well, no shit, Sherlock. Did you decide that when you saw the barricaded door or when I was pulled into the house?" Shinsu yelled, staring directly in Izuku's eyes, and Izuku felt something spark in him. Looking at the creep with cold, calculated eyes, a weird liquid formed around his arm and shaped itself in a weird-looking sigh. The man that was dragging Shinsu to what was probably his basement stumbled away with fear in his eyes. In front of him was a pair of electric green eyes that belonged to a boy that was on the news a couple months ago for suicide. The reason why the man recognized the kid so easily was because he was going to go after the supposed quirkless kid, but that changed after the death. Hell, you're dead. You died," the creep yelled while backing away, and Izuku growled dangerously. It was obvious that the man probably pissed himself from fear, even if the smile never left the man's face. Izuku guessed that creepy smile was permanent with the way his eyes told his true emotions. "Back away from the kid," Izuku growled out, the blade of the scythe glowing in the dark room. The man nodded quickly, letting go of Shinsu, and his hands went flying back to his body at extreme speeds. "You're lucky your soul isn't ripe yet, or I would have slaughtered you right here and right now," Izuku hissed out as the man quivered in fear before the Reaper. But that kid has a 6 villain quirk. I was doing the world a favor by taking him." The man was now on his knees, and Izuku gave him a death glare. "Maybe your soul is ripe," Izuku mumbled as he left his scythe in the air. "People like you don't belong in this shit world." Izuku then swung down fast, but he abruptly stopped himself from cutting the guy's head clean off. He then pressed the scythe gently to the man's neck and made the creep crawl closer to him. "You will head to the police and tell them your crimes. If you don't," Izuku pressed the scythe a bit harder against the back of the man's neck, "I will find you and take your ugly, miserable life." The creepy man nodded his head feverishly, and in a blink of the eye, he was gone. It was only Shinsu and Izuku in the eerie house, and there was some sort of comfortable but awkward silence. Holy shit. Thank you, I guess," Shinsu said, still on the ground from when he was being pulled roughly. "No problem. I'm sorry that I could help earlier. Are you alright, and what's your name?" Izuku held his hand out, waiting for the boy to grab on so he could be helped up. "The name is Hitoshi Shinsu," Shinsu said, grabbing onto Izuku's hand, and felt himself get pulled up from the ground. Izuku didn't even grunt from the weight, and it looked like it didn't even faze him in the slightest bit. "Well, Shinsu, will it be alright if I walk you home? I don't want any more creeps sneaking up on you. And if people can see me at the moment, then they will leave you alone," Izuku said with a big smile that made Shinsu feel safe. "I guess. Wait a minute. Have you been following this whole time? Were you the one at that one lady's house, and were you the green orbs?" Shinsu yelled, pointing at Izuku with squinting eyes. "Back." Izuku rubbed the back of his head when he realized he really had been caught, and his face flushed bright red. Yeah, sorry about that. I just thought your costume was really cool. And I found your voice was pretty unique too, so I just ended up following you." Izuku hid his face in his hands, too embarrassed to look at Shinsu. "That's creepy. Anyways, follow me," Shinsu said in a calm voice, and Izuku nodded and floated by him. "Here it is," Shinsu said, arms open wide like the orphanage in front of them was the greatest thing in history. "It is absolute shit, and I can't wait for the day I will be able to get out of it." Shinsu growled, a fake smile on his features, and Izuku felt a tinge of sadness for the boy. How do they treat you here? Izuku asked, looking at Shinsu with worry. And Shinsu looked away with shoulders hunched. Like shit. I have a villain's quirk, so they don't care about me, he mumbled. Shinsu didn't know why he was telling a random ghost. What's your quirk? Izuku looked over to Shinsu, who could even further on himself. Right at that moment, Shinsu was having a mental battle of whether or not he should tell Izuku about his quirk. Looking into the electric green eyes, Shinsu felt a wave of comfort and safety come from the boy, and he made a decision that he hoped was a good one. It's brainwashing. If you answer to me verbally, I can control you, Shinsu said, looking at the ground right away, waiting for the hate talk and discrimination to happen. That's so. Shinsu winced, waiting for the words villainous to come out of the ghost's mouth. Cool. Does it work on animals as well? And how long can you control someone? Do you have to give specific orders for them to complete the task, or do they do what you had in mind? Will your quirk work over phone and a recorded advice, and how many people can you control at once? That is so good for hero work. You can make the perfect underground hero. Like, I can think of so many possible ways that you can. Izuku cut himself off from his rambling when he saw Shinsu's shoulders shake and tears drip from his face and onto the ground. OMG, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to offend you or anything. I just thought your quirk was really C. Did you mean it? Shinsu interrupted Izuku. Izuku looked at the boy with confusion. Do I mean what? Do you really think I can be a hero with a villainous quirk? Shinasu dared to look up slightly and glanced into the ghost's eyes. Do you really mean it? When Izuku looked into the tear-filled eyes, he was back on the roof of a tall building with All Might, asking the older hero if he could become a hero without a quirk. Shinsu had the same look in his eyes that Izuku had when he asked All Might if he could be a hero. His eyes were filled with hesitation, doubt, worry, and the slightest bit of hope. Of course, there is no such thing as a villain quirk. It's all up to the user and how they use it. If you used it to save someone or help, it can become one of the most heroic quirks ever, Izuku said, eyes shining with determination. Shinsu sniffed once before he crumbled to the ground, crying silent tears. Izuku stayed beside him as Shinsu calmed down from the high of emotions he went through on the Halloween night. Izuku could definitely say this had been one of his most interesting Halloweens ever. Now, I think I may be able to help you with the orphanage problem, Izuku said, making Shinsu look up at him with hope gleaming in his eyes. 2 days after Halloween, Aizawa dragged his feet into the apartment and greeted the empty air and headed to the coffee machine. When he got to the coffee machine to create something strong for himself, he was greeted by sheets of paper that had info about a boy named Hitoshi Shinsu, and there was information about the orphanage he was in and adoption papers. I swear to God, Aizawa mumbled, grabbing the papers and headed to the kitchen table to read through them. You shouldn't swear to God, Denzawa, Eri mumbled while coloring in her book, unaware of how red she made Aizawa's face or how Yamada was trying to hold in his laughter. Rain pelted heavily on the headstone in front of the boy with blonde hair, his red eyes downcasted, hiding the tears streaming down his face as his guilt ate the inside of him. Katsuki Bakugo hated crying. His mother and teachers always talked about how tears showed he was weak, and Katsuki was anything but weak. He was strong, independent, hot-headed, and a naturally born leader. So why can't he stop the tears? Stupid Deku, why did you have to listen to me? Katsuki growled out, crouching down and pulling onto his hair. I thought you were smarter than this, so why did you do it? Katsuki yelled, not caring if other visitors gave him a nasty look. Frustration and guilt clawed at Katsuki, dragging him down wherever he went. It was all his fault. Despite the rain and other people that were visiting deceased loved ones, it was completely silent. The silence grated on Katsuki's nerves. He despised the quiet. The quiet always reminded him of his failures and mistakes. The quiet always laughed in his face when he was alone in his room crying or punching the punching bag. As much as I hate saying this, I miss your stupid muttering in class. At least when you were muttering, you were actually spouting smart shit instead of the stupid bullcrap that the extras always yelled. Katsuki took a deep shaking breath. What I'm trying to say here is, Katsuki looked away from the stone and into the small patches of trees nearby. I can't believe him fucking saying this. I fucking miss you. Green orbs looked at Katsuki from the forest, but the blonde-haired boy never noticed. One day, when I prove myself, I'm gonna come back and finally get the courage to fucking apologize. Katsuki placed his fist on the name Izuku Midoriya that was engraved in the headstone before he got up and walked away with a balled fist and a fiery, determined face. So be ready for when that day comes, nerd. It had taken Katsuki 2 weeks to gain the courage to visit Izuku's grave. And with more time, Katsuki hopes he can become a better person and finally apologize for all the shit he had done. Eri, make sure to stay by Aizawa all day. We don't want any accidents to happen to you when I'm wandering, okay? Izuku floated around the girl, making sure she had all the supplies in her purple cat backpack. Make sure to be extra good, and if you get lost, stay put and try imagining having me beside you. That will help me find you. A couple days earlier, Izuku and Eri had made a discovery with the weird bond they shared. Eri had gotten lost in a store when out with Nimuri, and while lost she started thinking of Izuku and the safety he brought to her. Izuku had felt a strong pull when he was at home, and he thought that it felt a lot like when he first met Eri, and followed it. He found Eri in less than 30 minutes while Nimuri was panicking about where the little girl was. Okay, I promise to be extra good. Eri bounced on the balls of her feet. This was only her second time at UA, and the people there were really nice to her. She was fond of this group that was starting to become well known in the school as the Big Three. But sadly she couldn't hang out with them because exams were just around the corner, and they were extra stressed as they tried to cram more info in their minds. Eri didn't know what the big deal of exams were, but Izuku told her she wouldn't have to worry about it for a while. If Izuku told her she didn't have to worry, then it can't be that harmful. Okay, problem child and sweet bean. We have to go. Aizawa's voice echoed through the house. With a giant smile, the two quickly went through the door Aizawa opened up for them. Aizawa kept the door open for a couple more seconds before closing it. He always did that when he became aware that Izuku was around. Izuku glanced over Mirio's shoulders as he looked through memes during a self-study period. The boy had an assignment to finish, and instead of doing it, he is looking through memes and being distracted easily. Izuku sighed as he placed a finger on the laptop that Mirio was using and brought up the assignment and hid the weird memes. Do you work, Mirio? We can't have one of the big three failing because of memes, Izuku mumbled, and Mirio awkwardly scratched the back of his neck while whispering out an apology. Mirio may not be able to hear him, but Mirio and his other two friends had become aware that the UA ghost, Mischief, was fond of them. The perks of having the ghost around was the fact that the local ghost made sure they got their work done and would bring up some sites that had the information they needed. But the downsides of having the ghost around was the constant pranks and cold feeling they get. It's so quiet, Izuku muttered to himself, now looking over Amajiki's shoulders and seeing him being responsible and doing his work like a good student. Sadly, with Izuku's luck, the quiet disappeared when the doors the classroom slammed opened and a tall lanky man with green and yellow hair came strolling in with a clipboard. Izuku froze where he was when he realized that the person in front of the class was Sir Nai, Aka, All Might's former sidekick. Mirio, I need you to come to the office with me, Sir Nai said in a calm and harsh voice, but Mirio knew he wasn't in trouble. Just one look in the eyes and you could read the man like a book. Okay, sir, Mirio said as he quickly stood up and grabbed his stuff, following the older man out. Izuku, being the curious soul he was, he followed behind the two. What did Sir Nai want to do with Izuku's friend? Izuku floated above the hero and hero in training with curiosity at its peak. Izuku never knew that Mirio had an internship with Sir Nai himself, and thousands of thoughts ran through Izuku's mind as he mumbled his thoughts out loud. So what did you want me for, sir? Mirio asked with the same curiosity as Izuku. We have an important meeting with a certain pro-hero. Izuku and Mirio perked up at the sound of another hero being interested in Miro, and Izuku began to buzz with excitement. Sure, Izuku is constantly hanging around heroes, but he will forever be a fanboy at heart. Really? What hero, sir? Mirio had a giant smile growing on his face. Mirio may not seem like it, but he was a huge hero fanboy as well. You'll see, was all the warning the two boys got as the door slammed open and a tall figure with bulky muscles walked in. Skin-tight suit on and a red cape attached. All Might walked into the room with a giant smile. I am here, All Might yelled into the room, and then the room's temperature dropped below zero. Eri sneezed as the room she was in grew extremely cold. She was just doodling a picture for Izuku when the sudden temperature drop occurred. Aizawa was looking around as if he was trying to find someone that would have made the temperature drop so suddenly. But no one else was in the room either than him, a blue-haired girl that called herself Nejire, and Eri. Diorar, is winter coming early this year? Nejire yelled out, rubbing her arms, and Eri agreed with her as she rubbed her hands together to keep them from going numb from the cold. No, a student probably lost control of their quirk. You two stay in here while I go investigate. Eri, take care of Nejire. Eri saluted, making Aizawa hide a smirk when he walked out of the room to find the source of the winter-like temperature. Not even a second after Aizawa left the room, the lights turned off for a solid 3 seconds before flickering back on. That itself was strange, and Eri didn't have a good feeling about this at all. The same could be said for Nejire. And maybe Mischief is just in a grumpy mood. Nejire didn't sound sure when she said that, making Eri look at her with curiosity. Who's Mischief? Joy quickly replaced the concern in Nejire's eyes almost instantly, and Nejire began to tell tales of UA's ghost that was named Mischief. Eri couldn't help but think that the ghost she was talking about was her big brother, Izuku. Is Izu okay? Eri thought to herself as Nejire bounced from story to story and snow began to fall from no cloud in the room. Izuku shivered as he glared at All Might. Izuku isn't one to hold grudges, and if he did, they were gone in less than a week. Izuku still had respect for the man after all. He saves lives every day. The words "think realistically" echoed in Izuku's mind as he watched All Might sit next to Sir Nai carefully. It sure has gotten cold in here. I wonder if a student's quirk went out of control. All Might spoke loudly and Mirio chuckled. It sure has. I swear winter is coming a bit early this year, Mirio said with a grin. Now if you guys don't mind me asking, what brought this meeting and why am I here? Think realistically, think realistically, think realistically. The only realistic thing a quirkless can do is jump. Jumped, pulled. Why mom? Why did she kill him? I'm sorry Aizawa. Izuku's mind screamed with every word that came out of All Might's mouth. Izuku didn't even realize that in the midst of his internal panic, that his scythe had formed. Izuku wasn't planning on killing anyone here since none of their souls were ripped, but the weapon gave an unknown comfort. All Might here has an exclusive offer for you that can change your life, Sir Night said, rubbing off the frost that was forming on his glasses thanks to the cold. But I think we should find a different room or turn on the heater. All Might agreed with Sir and quickly got up, turning on the heater in the room before sitting back down with the other two. You see, young Mirio, I have quite the unique quirk here. My quirk can be passed down, All Might said, going straight to the point. A quirk that can be passed down. How is that possible? Izuku gasped, gripping onto his scythe a little harder than necessary. Really, how is that possible? What is it called? Mirio leaned forward, eyes gleaming with interest. Izuku would have been the same way if it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't stop thinking about the roof after the slime incident. My quirk is known as One for All, and it has been passed down from generation to generation. It has grown quite strong, and well, you see, I am looking for a successor to carry this quirk. I am growing weak as the number one and I will need to retire sooner than what I would like. All Might lifted his shirt to show the deadly injury on his side, and Izuku's mind flashed to the moment where All Might showed Izuku his injury. Mirio winced when he saw the hero's stomach, or what's left of it, and Izuku agreed with the older boy. I was gravely injured during a fight some years ago, and my stomach was destroyed. I was able to get medical help, but they couldn't repair me to my former glory. Thanks to this injury, I can't be as active as the hero I used to be. I'm now stuck on a time limit on how long I can keep my muscle form. When All Might said that, he deflated into his civilian self. Mirio yelped in surprise. What? You're a skeleton now, Mirio yelled out, shocked from the appearance. I guess you can say that. All Might chuckled. Anyways, I'm only limited to around 3 hours of hero work a day now. Mirio nodded, trying to understand everything. His brain made a little reboot sound like it was a computer, and then all the information hit him like a train. Wyatt, when you said you were looking for a successor, are you looking at me for one of the candidates? Mirio yelled out. And then all the power went off and the backup emergency lights came on. They were not as bright as the other lights, and it gave the room a creepy vibe, especially when Mirio caught sight of 2 glowing green orbs by him. Mirio shivered when he looked at the dull glowing eyes, paling slightly as well. Sir Night and All Might gave him a concerned look. You all right there, Mirio? I didn't think the light turning off randomly would scare you that much. Sir Night leaned forward and Mirio quickly waved him off when he realized that they definitely can't see the orbs. Yeah, I'm fine. That was a surprise, to be honest. It was like the school was trying to set the mood for this conversation, haha. Miro laughed a bit forcibly. Luckily none of the heroes seemed to notice him sweating in the dim lighting. Alright then. Anyways, yes, you were correct about All Might choosing you as a candidate. If All Might passed the quirk down to you, it can power up your own quirk and you could become an even better hero. You will have an easier time saving more people. Sir leaned back comfortably on the couch, still unaware of the green orbs floating by Mirio. Mirio swore he heard a small broken voice whisper why beside him, but he brushed it off. I'm honored that you guys think that I'm a perfect candidate for this quirk, but I will have to decline that offer. Sir Night was about to try to convince Mirio to take the quirk, but the boy spoke before he could. If the quirk were to power up my quirk more than what it already is like, it would cause more troubles for me. I would like to save people with my own hard work and not take any easy ways. Taking All Might's quirk would feel like cheating. So thank you for the offer, but I truly have to decline. Mirio got up and bowed to the 2 heroes. All Might and Sir Night looked surprised that Mirio did not accept the offer, and Izuku didn't know if he felt glad, mad, or just empty at the moment. Understandable. If you ever want to change your mind, you can always come to talk to me or All Might, Mirio. Sir Night gave Mirio a smile before shooing the boy off to class. Izuku didn't realize Mirio left the room, or how Sir Night and All Might exchanged concerns about the power outage and the slowly decreasing temperature. I bet it's little mischief making this cold weather. Something must have ticked the little ghost off. All Might bellowed and Sir Night gave All Might a weird look. Ghost? There's no such thing as a ghost. Think realistically. Sir grumbled, unaware of the course of actions he just set off. Snow began to fall from no cloud in the room, causing both of the adults to jump in surprise. The snow continued to fall and its speed grew faster and faster until it began to look like a storm. What the hell? All Might yelled, rubbing his cold arms to gain some sort of heat from the freezing room. Maki isn't P, a disoriented whisper echoed in the howling winds. But it was deaf to the hero's ears. Is there a student that can control weather in this school? Sir Night-Eye went to the door, trying to open it, but it was frozen shut. Shit, Sir Night-Eye growled as he kept pulling on the door, and his breathes were visible thanks to the cold. Not that I am aware of, All Might said, looking around for what's causing this. His fingers were going numb, and All Might knew that if they didn't get out soon, he was gonna receive frostbite. Izuku was on the rooftop, staring at All Might with pleading eyes. Please, just tell me I can be a hero. I need a purpose, even if it's unattainable. Izuku's mind screamed as he asked the dreadful, can a quirkless kid like me be a hero? Izuku knew the answer. It kept him up at night. Think realistically, All Might replied, not fazed by the fact that he shattered a young boy's dreams, a young boy's purpose in life. All Might didn't realize he killed his true successor, and now the boy was in death's grasp constantly. You have a quirk that can be passed down. A quirk that could save a quirkless kid's life. A quirk that could help a quirkless kid chase their dreams. Instead, you guys are trying to give teenagers with already extremely powerful quirks something that can boost their ego and power. Izuku growled out, snow stopping in midair. Izuku looked at the two heroes who didn't know what was happening. Snowflakes frozen in the air around them and their breath heavy from the freezing air. Why, All Might? Both heroes flinched when they heard Izuku's disoriented, broken voice in the cold air. Who's there? Sir Night-Eye yelled, but there was no answer to his question. You could have just told me I could try it. You could have told me that it was almost impossible, that there was a sliver of chance that I could make it in. Not for me to think realistically. I was just a quirkless nobody that wanted to help. Izuku's voice was easier to hear now, and All Might paled. He knew that voice. That was the voice of the quirkless child that he saved from the slime incident. After all, he never heard someone so broken before. Sir Night-Eye and All Might were expecting the ghost to yell out more, but were caught off guard when the doors to the meeting room slammed open and a disheveled Aizawa and Yamada burst into the room, looking around frantically. Aizawa's nose and ears were red, and Yamada was wearing a jacket, making All Might and Sir think that this weather was affecting all of UA. Green Bean, are you in here? Yamada called out, and a gust of wind made Yamada shivered. Sir Night-Eye and All Might assumed it was just from the cold and not the boy who was now clutching onto the voice hero. Izu, we need you to stop this, okay? We literally have a foot of snow in the classrooms and some students are going into early hibernation because of their quirks. We need you to calm down. Aizawa spoke softly. I am sore, sorry. I lost my temper and I was back on the roof. Izuku cried out, deaf to Sir Night and All Might. But the other two pro-heroes in the room were able to hear him clearly thanks to their earpieces. It's all right, Izu, but you need to stop this weather, please, Aizawa loudly said. And after a moment, the freezing weather lifted slowly and it was back to room temperature. We're gonna need someone to clean up all this snow. Yamada frowned as his shoes became wet with now melting snow. Sorry, Yamada, Izuku whispered, not knowing the chaos he unleashed in Yamada's mind. Excuse me, but what is happening? I thought UA was supposed to be more stable than this. Sir Night-Eye walked up to the two pro-heroes, and they both frowned at Sir. We can't control what we cannot see or touch. And that was mischief. His quirk got out of control, and that's all you need to know. Aizawa grumbled out before turning around, dragging Yamada out. Izuku glanced over the two heroes in the room one last time, fingertips frozen with ice, and left them. Izuku felt stupid for letting himself out of control like that, but at least he learned he can make a room so cold that it can start snowing. Izuku floated into the room where the big three were playing a small game of Uno with Eri. Neji and Eri teamed up and were destroying poor Mirio. Mirio somehow got 27 cards in his hand, and Tamaki had 3 left. The girls didn't seem to care that Tamaki was winning. They were just happy making Mirio's life miserable. Eri was paying attention to the game and didn't notice Izuku's presence until she looked up. When she saw Izuku, her face brightened up instantly. Izu, Eri yelled out, catching the big three off guard. She ditched her hand on the ground, clambering forward and ran into Izuku's chest, causing the boy to make a small oof sound. When you left the room, it became really cold and it began snowing. I didn't know snow was so pretty, and Big Sister showed me how to make snow angels and Tamaki showed me a thing that was called a snowman. But I don't think circles can be a man. It was so cool. Then all of a sudden the snow melted, which made me sad. But it was really pretty and I got to play in puddles until a person came in and cleaned it up. Eri rambled to Izuku and he couldn't hold back the smile that spread across his face. He was glad Eri enjoyed the snow he accidentally created. Wait. You can see mischief? Neji came bounding forward, almost knocking the equally curious Tamaki and Mirio over. How? I thought they were a ghost. Izu is a ghost. He's a good ghost and saved me from the evil man, Eri said, smile on her face but eyes slightly distant from the memory. Izuku tapped Eri's arm, reminding her of where she was, and Neji grabbed Eri's hands and begged her to tell her what mischief looked like. Eri thought, glancing at Izuku to get a better look at him to see if anything changed. He is like this tall, Iri stood on her tippy toes trying to show his height but couldn't fully reach it. Very messy green hair, which he won't let me brush. Iri crossed her arms with a pout, and he has this cute ghost costume and a weird staff with a big blade. Oh, and he also has lots of freckles. He looks and acts like the perfect family. Iri cheered loudly. And the big three thought their hearts were gonna explode from how cute Iri was when describing UA's ghost. Izuku started crying when Iri said he was like the perfect family. He tried so hard for her and was glad that she thought that. Grabbing her, Izuku nuzzled his face into her hair as he spinned around with her in his arms. Despite seeing All Might again and having some sort of mental breakdown, Iri's kind words made his day so much better. Iri grumbled as she pulled on the brush, tears forming at the edges of her eyes as the brush pulled her hair painfully and got rid of the knots. Earlier that week, Iri watched a nice Disney movie with Izuku, Yamada, and Aizawa. The movie was about a princess who was locked up in a tower with magical hair. Iri loved the movie, and it became one of her second favorite movies of all time. Iri couldn't remember the name of the movie, but she did remember that the princess had her hair in a very pretty braid. Iri was trying her best to duplicate the braid the princess had. But no matter what, she kept messing up. She didn't know how the girls in the movie made it look so easy. Grumbling, Iri tried weaving her hair once again, but cried out in agitation as she stopped when she screwed up and folded her arms with a pout. Iri, is everything all right? A very familiar voice echoed behind her, making Iri turn around to greet Izuku. Hi Izu, Iri whispered, not telling the boy what's wrong because she thought he would get mad at her for something so stupid. Wiping her eyes, Iri looked away and stared at the discarded brush. She just wanted to feel like a princess. Iri, what's wrong? Izuku floated down to her level, scythe in his hands as he used the weapon to keep balance while crouching. Izuku hated it when Iri was upset. And the fact she wasn't telling him anything meant that she probably thought it was stupid. But whenever Iri thought that, it was never a stupid problem. Izuku loved helping his little bean out. After some hesitation, Iri looked up into Izuku's milky eyes. I want my hair like hers, Iri whispered, making Izuku have to strain his ears slightly to hear what she said. Izuku gave Iri a confused look, head tilting to the side slightly. Who's her? Izuku asked Iri. Iri chewed on her lip as she slowly moved her hand up. The little girl pointed to the TV screen that had Rapunzel in the boat with Eugene. Rapunzel had her hair up in a braid with many beautiful flowers. You want your hair braided? Izuku asked nicely, and Iri nodded, fiddling with her hands. Tears were threatening to spill from the girl's eyes, making Izuku's heart break slightly. I can braid your hair if you would like me to, Izuku whispered, putting his scythe to the side. Ah, really? You can make me all look like a princess? Iri asked, hope in her eyes as she bounced slightly, making Izuku nod enthusiastically at her. You're already a princess, Iri. And of course I can braid your hair. I used to braid my moth. Izuku's sentence died off as he was about to mention his mother. Sadness and betrayal tearing at his guts, but he ignored it as he gave Iri a giant smile. Iri was more important than his tragic past. But I will need your help. I can't really brush your hair since I can't hold the brush, but I can still braid it, Izuku said, making Iri nod with a determined look on her face, and she grabbed her brush again and went through her naughty hair. When Yamada came home, he was expecting to see his husband on the couch snuggling up with Iri as the little girl watched a movie while Aizawa caught up on some missing sleep. What Yamada was not expecting to see was Iri sitting on the floor, hair flying in the air as Rapunzel played in the background. What the heck? Yamada yelled out. Thankfully his quirk didn't activate as he yelled in surprise. Iri's head snapped up towards the blonde hero, and the hair that was flying in the air continued to intertwine with each other. Hi Yamadad, Iri chirped, and Yamada felt his heart melt for the little girl. Hi Apo-S. Yamada's spirit box earpiece crackled to life as the resident ghost spoke to the pro hero. Yamada was able to decipher the first word as hi, but he couldn't figure out what the second word was, so he thought nothing of it. How is her hair floating, Iri? Yamada asked. Eyes widened when he saw a braid forming beautifully. Izu is doing it. He said he could make my hair look like the one from the movie. Iri pointed to the screen, which made Yamada have a smile grow on his face. Despite Izuku being dead, he was still helping people. It was nice. Maybe he can teach you how to make a braid. And then you can do mine and Aizawa's hair, Yamada said loudly. And Iri nodded quickly. The thought of doing both of her parental figures' hair sounded like a great idea. Iri, keep still. I don't want to pull your hair, Izuku grumbled as he almost messed up. Iri quickly sat as still as she could, a smile on her face at the thought of being like the characters in the movies. When Aizawa came home from a meeting that was longer than it should have, he was absolutely exhausted. He just wanted to go to bed and sleep for the rest of his life, but something stopped him from getting to his room. On the couch, Iri had a long French braid in her hair that looked like it was perfectly done, and Yamada was holding onto her while he had a messy 3-strand braid. They were both sleeping peacefully as the movie, Rapunzel, was coming to an end. Aizawa smiled softly, aiming his phone camera to get a photo of the two. When Aizawa looked at his phone to see how the picture came out, he had a pleasant surprise. Beside the two there were green orbs floating by them, indicating that Izuku was with them. The picture definitely did not become his new phone background. If there was one thing Aizawa hated more than not getting sleep and running out of coffee, it was getting sick. Aizawa had woken up with a terrible headache after a nightmare about a certain night, and the headache only grew worse as the day progressed. He felt like absolute shit. It was hard for him to move as his body protested and screamed at him to stay still. He had no energy at all, was feeling extremely cold even though he was sweating up a storm, and the sound of food just made him want to throw up. Aizawa groaned as he turned onto his side, snuggling deeper into the blankets on top of him. Aizawa wanted to sleep this off so bad, but he knew that his nightmares only got worse with his high temperature. Luckily, there was a cool feeling against his head that helped him relax slightly. Then there was a small little mewling sound that came from the floor beside Aizawa's bed, which caught the hero's attention. Right now, Yamada and Eri are out having a sleepover at Nimuri's house. Eri wanted to hang out with Auntie Nimuri, but Aizawa or Yamada needed to watch them over so Nimuri wouldn't corrupt Eri. Aizawa had to stay home because Nezu gave him a workload he had to get through, so Yamada was left to defend Eri by himself. "What?" Aizawa croaked out, throat slightly sore as he was trying his best to look at Midori, the green kitten. There was the sound of pattering feet and then another mewling sound, but higher this time, came around. Aizawa instantly knew it was their second cat, Coffee. And not 3 seconds later, there was a thumping sound of their oversized tabby, Bastard. Bastard was, well, a bastard. The cat would constantly demand food, and if you didn't give him the food he wanted, you could say goodbye to your ankles and headphones. "Shit, I have to feed you guys," Aizawa grumbled when he realized that Yamada and Eri forgot to fill their food bowl. With a grunt, Aizawa instantly regretted sitting upwards. His vision swamped quickly and he felt slightly lightheaded as his headache throbbed. He didn't have the energy at all to get up, and Aizawa feared he might fall on one of the cats. Aizawa was about to stand up after a couple seconds, but there was a feeling of cold pressurized wind that just made him fall back. The spirit box earpiece beside Aizawa cracked as a familiar voice echoed through the quiet room. "Relax. Yo Risikke. IYLEP." The earpiece crackled, making Aizawa groan. Of course he wasn't alone in the house. Aizawa was sure that Izuku would have followed Eri and Yamada to Nimuri's house, but he ain't complaining. When Izuku returned home after wandering the streets for a bit, he was surprised to not see Aizawa up. The hero was usually up really early and it was around noon at the moment, so having the hero not awake and scowling at papers set off a few alarms. The second thing to send one of Izuku's instincts off was the distressing sound that came from Aizawa's and Yamada's room. Being cautious, Izuku poked his head through the door to see Aizawa wrapped up in his blanket, mumbling something as he tossed and turned. Izuku instantly knew the older man was having a nightmare, and Izuku felt a huge wave of guilt when he heard Aizawa mumble out his name with so much fear and stress. Is Aizawa dreaming about that night? Izuku thought to himself, worried about the older man. Izuku floated by Aizawa's bed, putting his hand on the man's head. Izuku couldn't touch Aizawa thanks to him being dead and, well, a ghost, but Izuku could feel the heat radiating off of the Aizawa's face. He's running a fever, Izuku thought as he backed up, but quickly placed his hand back on the older man's face. People always talked about how ghosts have cold spots, so maybe Izuku could try and help cool the hero's head with his ghost-like abilities. Aizawa was still muttering in his sleep as the nightmare proceeded to go on, and Izuku began to whisper gentle words, hoping Aizawa could hear a few. The earpiece would be too loud and would probably set off a panic attack if Izuku used it. Izuku stayed like that for around an hour before Aizawa began to stir and woke up to the sound of Midori trying to find them. Of course, when Midori comes, the other two cats just had to follow and bug Aizawa to feed them. Couldn't the cats see that Aizawa wasn't feeling well? When Aizawa tried to get up, Izuku panicked and tried to push the hero back down, which seemed to work well. Thinking it was safe, Izuku then spoke into the spirit box, telling Aizawa to take it easy. Having Aizawa moving around wouldn't be ideal and could lead to Aizawa feeling worse. Izuku didn't have much experience with people who are sick, but he will try his best. He just had to keep Aizawa well rested and try to keep his temp down until Yamada came back. With that thought in mind, Izuku began to wonder how he was going to feed the cats. Would his scythe work? Izuku remembers that his scythe was able to touch people when he was protecting Eri, so would he be able to touch objects with it? Izuku huffed loudly as the cats ate happily out of their bowls. It took almost an hour of trying, but Izuku was able to open up the cat's food with his scythe. It was a tough task, but Izuku felt proud of himself as he headed back to Aizawa's room and continued to place his hand on Aizawa's forehead. The temperature has gone down slightly and Izuku was relieved about that. He didn't know what he would do if the temperature was at a dangerous level. I know I should be thinking about this, but this kinda reminds me of when I used to be sick and my mom had to look after me. She would always brush my hair out of my face and apply cold cloths so my temperature would go down. She always hummed this one song as she took care of me. She always said that if I was sick, that small songs could help make me feel better. I can remember most of the notes," Izuku mumbled out before he began to hum a small tune from memory. A tear slipped from his eyes as he rubbed them away quickly, but continued to hum. If possible, Aizawa seemed to relax more and Izuku smiled gently. He may not be able to help as much as Yamada and Eri could, but he would do for now. A couple minutes passed as Izuku looked at Aizawa's temperature and kept Aizawa as cool as possible while he fought off the fever. Izuku became restless and the urge to move grew with every passing moment. Luckily, Izuku was a stubborn ghost and kept in place. Well, that was until Aizawa slowly sat up, then began to run to the bathroom in a hurry. Izuku winced when he heard Aizawa retch into the toilet of the bathroom. Izuku floated into the bathroom to see Aizawa shaking and pale while hugging the bowl loosely. To say Aizawa looked like a mess was an understatement. Grimacing lightly, Izuku floated to Aizawa's height and began to rub circles on the man's back. Izuku didn't know if Aizawa was hallucinating or was able to see him, but Aizawa looked into Izuku's eyes before whispering a small Izu. Izuku felt a shiver go down his spine as he gave Aizawa a small smile. "Yep, that's me. You'll be all right. You just need rest, and once Yamada is here, we can take proper care of you, okay?" Izuku whispered, and Aizawa nodded his head before heading back to bed and laying down. Izuku thought it would be a good idea to be prepared and went to grab a bucket for Aizawa to puke in just in case he wouldn't be able to make it to the bathroom. But when Izuku went to leave, he had to stop when he heard Aizawa mumble a tired stay. Izuku's eyes widened as he turned around to see Aizawa still looking at him. Could Aizawa actually see him or was he hallucinating? "Don't worry, Dad. I'm just grabbing a bucket for you to use in case you can't make it to the bathroom in time," Izuku reassured the man. And Aizawa nodded before he drifted off into sleep once again. To say Izuku was glad that Yamada was home was an understatement. The moment the man walked into the door, Izuku yelled at Yamada through the earpiece to tell him that his husband was sick. He gave the poor hero a heart attack from his sudden yelling. Luckily, Yamada was able to take control of the situation in no time. He was able to nurse Aizawa back to his old self, which gave Izuku a huge wave of relief. Sadly, Aizawa didn't seem to remember seeing Izuku or hearing him, which made Izuku slightly sad. But he ain't gonna complain. Aizawa was back to good health, and that was all Izuku could really ask for at the moment. Izuku fiddled with his fingers while trying his best not to look into Nezu's eyes. Izuku was called down to his office after the snow fiasco when Izuku had some sort of mental breakdown. Izuku had been trying his best to suppress all of the emotions he was feeling since his death, but it was getting harder with each day that passed by. Izuku wanted to scream, to punch something, to make someone pay, but he can't do that. Izuku didn't know what he was capable of. Especially when Izuku accidentally created a blizzard out of thin air with a small breakdown over All Might wanting to give a person with a powerful quirk an even more powerful quirk. He didn't want to know what he would be able to do if he let everything out. Not only that, Izuku didn't want to be seen as a villain, even if no one can interact with him. The thought of being a villain brought a shiver down Izuku's back and made him shake his head violently. He didn't want these thoughts, not when he was in trouble. "Do you know how you did that?" was the first thing Nezu said, making Izuku flinch from him. I lost control of my emotions, sir," Izuku mumbled out. Izuku almost forgot what it was like to be scolded by someone or get in trouble. "I'm sorry, and it's understandable if you don't want me here anymore." Izuku's shoulders reached his ears, tears threatening to spill, but they didn't. "I don't plan on kicking you out, Izuku. You just lost control of your quirk, which seems to happen quite often in this school. And you're not in trouble. I just want to find the root of your problems." Nezu leaned forward, hands brought together as he gave Izuku a worried look. Or at least Izuku thought it was worry. It was hard to tell with Nezu. "What happened between you and All Might that made you react like that?" Izuku felt himself freeze in his thoughts for a long moment. What would Nezu do if he found out All Might told Izuku to think realistically and left him stranded on a roof after he was told to jump at school? Would All Might get away without scot-free, or would All Might get yelled at? What would All Might do if he figured out Izuku had listened on his secretive conversations? Izuku's mind raced. Then a final thought came to mind: he can't do anything to you, you're a ghost. Nezu was patient as he waited for Izuku's answer, which the young boy was grateful for. Izuku preferred being able to get his thoughts straight instead of having them as a raging storm that was a complete mess. Izuku's mouth opened before he closed it again, biting on his knuckle. Taking a deep breath, Izuku began to speak to Nezu, hoping the principal won't kill All Might or somehow send Izuku to hell or something like that. "A couple days before I died and met you, I was attacked by a slime villain. The villain was gonna use my body as an escape, but All Might came and saved me from being suffocated to death. When All Might was about to leave, I did a reckless thing," Izuku mumbled out. Luckily, Nezu was able to hear him easily with his little ears. Izuku took another breath, grabbing onto his scythe that appeared out of thin air and held it close. "I grabbed onto his leg when he jumped through the air. I guess I clinged on hard enough for me not to fall. and we were able to land on a roof safely. I swore I saw my non-existent life flash before my eyes during that moment. Haha. Not my brightest idea. Izuku scratched the back of his head. Avoiding eye contact, I wanted to ask All Might a question that was extremely important to me. Can a quirkless kid like me become a hero? And he said no, didn't he? Nezu was now sitting beside Izuku on the small couch, legs swinging back and forth. He told me no, and to think realistically. Izuku whispered, and that's when Nezu instantly knew exactly what happened. Earlier that day I was told to jump off of a roof, which led to my predicament. The only realistic thing that a quirkless kid could do was to perish, to pass away so no one would ever have to have the burden of dealing with me again. So when All Might told me to think realistically, it kinda felt like he told me my life wasn't worth it. Izuku tried to hold in his tears. He tried so hard. He didn't know if he would cause a blizzard with his emotions once again. It's all right to cry, Izuku. If a snowstorm happens, we can have someone clean it up. Nezu spoke softly. Izuku swore that he was a different person from how soft he was being. That was all Izuku needed though. Izuku wailed out loudly, clutching harshly to the weird outfit on his chest. The anger from earlier wilted with each tear of anger, sadness, and betrayal that dropped onto the floor, turning into ice. Why? Izuku cried out, why do we have to suffer so much when we just want to live? Izuku yelled, lights flickering. No snowflakes were in sight. We just want to be loved. Nezu continued to sit by Izuku, staying quiet as the boy cried out his troubles. He was definitely gonna have a talk with All Might. In another room where Sir Ngh Tedai and All Might were talking, All Might felt a shiver go down his spine. Yagi was in the middle of having a conversation with Sir Night Eye when the UAS speakers turned on and Nezu called him down to the office. The Chimera was usually calm and collected. No emotion but evil joy in his voice when he talked, but everyone could clearly hear the disappointment in it today. Was that what caused Yagi to shiver earlier? Yagi was hesitant to head to the office, afraid of what the principal would do to him. Yagi had half of his mind on the thought of just turning around and pretending that he had not heard the principal, but he knew better. Nezu knows practically everything. Yagi was about to open the door to the small office, but Nezu opened it up before he could reach the doorknob. He didn't know if it was the chilling smile or the fact that it was a winter wonderland in the school for a couple minutes, but Yagi felt a violent shiver go down his spine as a breeze went past him. Come in, we have lots to talk about, Nezu said, voice cold of emotion. Yagi nodded slowly, taking a seat across from the principal who didn't offer him tea like usual. This was like a beginning of a horror movie or a murder mystery show with how much tension there was between the two. Nezu didn't seem to be affected by the atmosphere, while Yagi did his best to not squirm underneath his gaze. So, think realistically, if a suicidal quirkless kid walked up to you and asked if they could be a hero, what would you say? Nezu didn't move his gaze, still staring into Yaga's electric blue eyes. I would have told them that it wouldn't be wise to become a hero and almost impossible, but they still had a chance. Nezu spoke before Yagi could say a single word. Sweat dripped down his face. He wanted to argue with Nezu and say that it was impossible for a quirkless person to be a hero. Fighting spirit is an important part for being a hero, but they needed a quirk so they wouldn't be killed in cold blood right away. Yagi stayed silent. Nezu was upset with how Yagi stayed quiet and didn't answer him, so he went straight to the point. You told a suicidal quirkless kid that they couldn't be a hero and left them on a roof, Yagi Toshinori. You left a suicidal kid on a goddamn roof after completely destroying their dream. What the hell were you thinking? Nezu didn't raise his voice or began yelling. He kept his voice leveled and calm, but whoever was around could feel the disappointment in it. Nezu was glad he sent Izuku out for a walk to calm himself. This would probably have caused an avalanche of snow in UA. Yagi instantly knew what Nezu was talking about now. Yagi remembered the green-haired kid that was so desperate for an answer that he clinged onto his leg as he jumped through the air into the nearest building. Yagi didn't want to lie and ask what he was talking about, but he was curious about how the Chimera figured everything out. Last time Yagi checked, that roof didn't have any cameras. That's why he was able to tell the young boy about his injury without much fear of being exposed. You didn't think, Yagi. And it cost a young boy's life. A young boy who would have been a great student of this school for his brains and analyzing skills, which you seem to lack during this year. Nezu hasn't taken a sip out of his tea during the whole time as he scolded the other hero. I can't give you the same punishments as other heroes since you are the number one right now, but I will warn you. You deserve what you have coming. I don't want to see you until you rethink your life actions and write a whole essay on mental health and how to save someone from their own mind. I will be revoking your teacher's license until I see you become better, and if you don't, you're out of here. That's all I have to say. Now get out. Yagi stumbled out of the room feeling like his soul was ripped away from his body. That was one of the most terrifying moments of his life. If there was any moment where he felt so happy he was number one, it would be right now. Yagi did not want to deal with whatever punishment a normal hero would have had to face. When walking back to where Sir Night-Eye was, a ball rolled in front of Yagi, making him stop his tracks in confusion. Blinking with surprise, Yagi crouched down to get a better look at the object. He soon regretted the action when the ball exploded in his face with pink glitter. Hitoshi was not in a good mood. He woke up to his foster parents screaming at each other over who had to drive Hitoshi to school. The smell of cigarette smoke assaulted his nostrils as he tried to breathe, and Hitoshi was already exhausted. He didn't get much sleep, probably only around an hour thanks to his insomnia. Hitoshi's stomach grumbled as he trudged out of his room and made his way to the kitchen, ignoring how his parents instantly went quiet. They were only this quiet when Hitoshi was around cause they feared that the lavender-haired boy would control them, even though they never answered him at all. It always stung. Ignoring his parents' argument, the boy decided it would be best for him to walk to school and take public transport. Then after school he could walk to the nearby library to finish his work. If there was one thing Hitoshi knew about his parents, you can see when they're mad when they are driving. They always drove more recklessly and dangerously. It is a terrifying experience. I'm going to school. Don't expect to see me till 7. Hitoshi yelled behind him before slamming the door. He was so tired of their bullshit and he didn't even have his morning coffee. Maybe he would be able to grab one before he went to the library. With that thought in mind, Hitoshi quickly passed a short lady with long green hair and made his way to school. The faster he was done with school, the faster he could get his coffee. Izuku followed a random cat that was walking down the sidewalk. It had been a very emotionally draining day for Izuku with everything that has been going on. First the talk between All Might, Sir Night-Eye, and Myro, then figuring out he had a second part to his quirk, then him having a complete meltdown when he was trying to keep everything inside for so long. At least he felt slightly lighter than before and that he is an absolute sweetheart. Where are you going? Izuku asked, eyebrows quirked upwards when the cat kept on turning left in the slightly populated place. It never turned right, it just kept turning left and going in circles. Izuku wanted to keep following the feline to see where it would end up, but decided he had enough and floated away. Maybe he could figure out what he could do with the sai. Izuku had never really used it before, only when he needed comfort and when he was attacking the jerk with the plague mask on. Focusing on the feeling that the weapon would bring, Izuku was able to bring it out of thin air easily. The scythe felt nice to be in Izuku's hands. He felt weird without it. Izuku felt more like him with it, swinging around it a few times. Izuku was careful of the very few people around him. He didn't want to accidentally kill someone because he was playing around with his weapon. You're gonna cut someone's head off if you keep doing that. An exhausted voice caught Izuku off guard, making the weapon in his hand vanish in a small cloud of smoke. "Ack!" Izuku cried out, turning around to see who was talking to him. It was a boy with gravity-defying hair and beautiful lavender eyes. Izuku accidentally stared into the eyes of the stranger longer than he should. But he didn't think it mattered when the purple-haired boy looked around with a surprised look on his face before continuing on walking. "Wait, did he see me?" Izuku asked loudly to himself as a small group of friends, one with pink skin, another with red hair, and a boy with yellow hair, walked through him. The group of 3 shivered, and the same with Izuku. He would never get used to the fact that people are walking through him like he wasn't there. Shaking his head, Izuku floated through a couple people and caught up to the other boy. It seemed like he didn't realize that Izuku joined him on his small walk. Maybe this boy didn't actually see Izuku and it was his imagination. But the purple-haired kid talked to him and made eye contact. After the weird encounter with the green-haired boy with the scythe, Hitoshi finally made it to a nearby coffee shop. There weren't that many people there, which Hitoshi was absolutely glad for. He didn't have the patience to deal with crowds. Going up to the counter, Hitoshi greeted the tired worker. "Hello, can I have a large black coffee with 7 espresso shots?" Hitoshi asked, and the worker nodded, putting the order down and taking Hitoshi's money. Hitoshi swore he heard someone say, "Holy crap, might as well do cocaine." But when the teen tried to find the owner of the voice, he didn't see anyone. He must have been really tired. Today was such a weird freaking day so far, and a stressful one. Izuku floated upside down above Hitoshi as he sat in the library. The library was empty at the moment, which wasn't too bad, except for the fact that the library looked so old that it could be used in a horror film. Now that Izuku thought about it, he could probably make some good horror stories for other kids to share. Nah, he won't do that. That's a little too mean. A moment had passed and soon a wave of students came into the library, making Izuku curse internally. What was quiet and peaceful turned chaotic and slightly loud. It wasn't loud enough that it would piss the librarian off, but loud enough to make it harder for some other students to study. Now that Izuku thought about it, why didn't the purple-haired boy come to the library with any friends? Did he not have any? Were they too busy? What the hell? The boy Izuku was floating above whispered yelled, catching Izuku's attention. Izuku had a bewildered expression when he realized that the random coffee teen was looking directly at him with startled eyes. As they chage, the librarian that was putting away books beside the boy glared at him like he was the loudest kid there. "You're not allowed to talk in here, Shinsu Hitoshi." The librarian continued to growl out, and Izuku felt a small urge to test out his scythe again. The kids that were around Hitoshi all snickered at him, but Izuku noticed that they also had fear in their eyes. Fear of Hitoshi. "Hey, it isn't very nice to pick on someone, you old creepy lady." Izuku yelled at the librarian, aware that he was going to be ignored like usual. He hated being ignored, but he was getting used to it. "Shouldn't you be focusing more on your books?" Izuku growled, crossing his arm, and a snowflake or two fluttered down. He really needed to figure how to control that part of the quirk. Hitoshi looked between the librarian and Izuku a couple times before he pulled out a notebook and wrote in it, "Can the others see you?" Hitoshi wrote down, coughing lightly to gain Izuku's attention from the librarian with success. "Nope, I'm a ghost, so no one can see me." "Well, other than you and my little one apparently. How can you even see me? What do I look like to you? What's your quirk? Do I need to set off the fire alarm to have the sprinklers come out and soak their stuff? Those guys seem like assholes and remind me of my school. I can pull a mean prank if that is preferred over me beating them." Izuku began to talk, unaware that he was starting to ramble. "Old habits die hard. Hang on, I can only do so many questions and listening at once." Hitoshi quickly wrote down and tapped his notebook with his pencil so Izuku would look at it. I'm so sorry. It's not every day I can meet someone who can see me. Anyways, my name is Izuku Midoriya." Izuku chirped, now sitting on thin air beside Hitoshi. When Hitoshi was thinking, his thoughts always went to the fact that Izuku said he was a ghost. Hitoshi never really thought hard about the paranormal before, since he wasn't too interested in it, but he guessed that ghosts and demons could happen with today's society. But how was Hitoshi able to see him and not the others? Now that Hitoshi thinks about it, in some movies ghosts would present themselves to certain people and not everyone. Maybe that's what's happening with Izuku. If you're a ghost, how did you die? Hitoshi winced at himself for asking a sensitive question. But Izuku didn't seem to mind. "I was pushed off of a roof. Nothing much." Izuku shrugged, pushing the emotions down once again. But Hitoshi could tell there was more to that story with the way how Izuku's eyes glistened with tears and became distant for a second. "Anyways, I hope you don't mind me hanging out with you for a while. I'm bored and I have absolutely nothing to do." Izuku groaned out, and Hitoshi could only nod. How did his life become like this? First it's the arguing parents. Then it was avoiding bullies and being called villain. Then Hitoshi seeing the ghost play with a weapon in the middle of the sidewalk and the weird comment in the cafe. And now he was befriending a ghost. "I'm starting to think I need to go to therapy," Hitoshi mumbled, making Izuku burst out laughing. Same, to be completely honest. That guy may seem caring and the nicest person ever, but he is an idiotic bastard. Izuku pointed to a picture of All Might next to Endeavor in Hitoshi's history book, startling Hitoshi from his deep thoughts about how they defeated the villain in the textbook. "Endeavor?" Hitoshi questioned the other, getting a shrug from the ghost once again. "Endeavor is a piece of flaming shit that can go to hell and burn. I'm talking about All Might. Freaking bastard for leaving me to drown in uncontrollable crushing emotions." Izuku grumbled out in agitation. Hitoshi wanted to ask what the hero exactly did to Izuku, but didn't. He didn't want to step over any boundaries. If he was such a bastard to you, why don't you get some sort of revenge? Not saying you should kill him, since that would be unfortunate, but make his life a living hell. Hitoshi was regretting his words as he wrote them down. He will not be talking anytime soon, since the librarian is keeping such a close eye on him. Curse his villainous quirk. It's not like Hitoshi wanted it. Izuku raised an eyebrow and began to mumble in his hands. "I mean, All Might isn't villainous in any way that I know of. He's just a freaking bastard because he doesn't think about the consequences of his words and leaves children's dreams crushed. But maybe getting some sort of revenge would help some of the anger I have. But that isn't really the right way to go, since getting revenge isn't heroic at all. But same with cutting a man's hand off. Chisaki deserved it. But what should I do? I don't want to hurt the hero, but I want to do something that would be hard to forget." Izuku was unaware of the bubble he made with his mumbling, and Hitoshi wouldn't lie when he said he was starting to get annoyed with it. How about glitter bombs or something in that area? No matter how many times you wash something, the glitter will never disappear. It's there to haunt your ass for the rest of your life. Hitoshi mumbled out, glaring back at the librarian who was shushing him despite him being quiet. Hitoshi knew a thing or two about how much of a pain in the ass glitter was, since a couple bullies had poured glitter all over him once. That was a terrible day. He was left coughing out sparkles for a week. "I like the way you think, Hitoshi." Izuku smiled brightly, making the other squint away while mumbling something about the sun. "I should probably get going so I can plan the glitter bomb prank. It was nice meeting you, Hitoshi." Izuku yelled out as he floated away in a hurry, leaving the teen alone once again. Hitoshi may or may not have wanted to see the weird ghost again. The ghost had a safe aura around him, only if he knew what chaos that boy would get him into. Okay, sadly the chapter is over, and if you enjoyed the video just leave a like, and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.